49. Davoud and Jacobs began a detailed examination of the ship. It wasn't that they were looking for something, they were looking for everything. There were so many questions that had to be answered before they could even come up with an intelligent option. The first question, of course, was whether the ship could fly. After that would come the question as to whether or not the ship should fly. And if it should, where would it go? But first, Dakuda needed to know if they could even get off the ground. On that score, there was some good news and some bad news. Parker Davoud had never been on the command bridge of a Vulture-class dropship. He'd never piloted a Seeker either, but he'd had simulation training on the type. The Seeker was an ovoid design rather than the Aerodyne configuration that he had brought down. That meant the ship would land on extended legs, settling straight down onto the target. His ship had operated more like an aircraft, requiring a strip for takeoff and landing maneuvers. Davoud settled himself into the command seat and ran through the computer simulation sequence. It would take a day or two to become familiar with the instrumentation and access programs. That shouldn't be a problem, for the ship had ample reserve power in the storage capacitors. Any additional power requirements could be supplied by the Locust. There were power access ports on both the mech and the dropship, and even though there were no common cables, Jacobs could cobble something together. The bottom line was that neither man saw any reason why the ship shouldn't be able to fly. Docking was another question. Davoud took a good look at the exterior of the egg-shaped craft. Though the interior had been sealed for the 500 years it had sat there, the ship's exterior had not been so protected. 500 years was a long time for metal to resist the attacks of nature, no matter how well protected it might be. In addition, the weight of the dropship, which was about 10,000 tons, had also affected the dropship's situation. By its own weight, the ship had settled into the ground until the entire lower hull arc had pushed below the surface. The 6 landing legs were embedded to a depth below the access doors, and the doors themselves had buckled under the weight. They would not close, and there was some doubt as to whether the legs would retract. There were also signs that, aside from the ruptured area that had killed so many of the crew, the ship's outer skin had lost some structural integrity. Davoud ran a pressure test on the vessel's interior, and the results had neither condemned nor vindicated the strength. The frame was still straight, the laser designator and mirrors confirming that the columns and spokes that formed the skeleton had remained true. The quad-thrust V-450s were completely buried. There was no way to test whether they would actually fire on demand. Davoud had gotten a green reply from the several diagnostic programs he'd run on them, but he still couldn't be sure that they would fire. That was Jacobs's problem. The result of all this inspection was a maybe to the question of flight. Though they found no obvious reason why the dropship couldn't fly, suspicions lurked that it would not. The only way to be absolutely sure was to try, but that was probably going to happen only once. It might fly the first time, but the chances of it being able to do it more than once were a gamble Davoud was not thrilled about taking. Jacobs's news was not as good. Getting the fusion core restarted would be a problem because it had died long before. They could create a magnetic vessel to contain the reaction from the energy of the Locust's own reactor. It had enough power, assuming the mech didn't need to move, to generate the bottle. The second problem was supplying the tritium for the reaction core. Tritium was produced by a neutron flux passing through water, which could be produced by breaking up the shielding also found around the Locust reactor and filling the cavity with water. So far, so good. They could then extract the water and use electric current to split it into hydrogen and oxygen, then dump the raw hydrogen into the fuel system. The reaction could then be triggered by firing a laser through the tritium inside the bottle. Voila! Reaction. The Locust medium laser had more than enough kilojoules to initiate the process. But the biggest but was the impossibility of getting the laser energy into the center of the reactor housing. The only way would be to separate the laser from the locust chin mount and carry it into the dropship. If all those tasks could be accomplished, the dropship would have power. That was fine for the energy requirements of the vessel, but none of that would get it off the ground. For that, they needed hydrogen fuel. Under normal circumstances, the dropship would be fueled with liquid hydrogen from holding tanks at a spaceport. The Seeker Vulture class carried enough fuel to get off the ground, land, get off, and land again. That allowed the dropship to land on some planet as part of an assault force and still have enough fuel to get back to the mother jump ship and then return planetside. The Toyotomi had been fully fueled when it departed Salford. They landed hard but safely without rupturing the fuel cells. But time and the little hydrogen molecules had taken their toll. The fuel cells were less than half full. There would be enough to get the Toyotomi off the ground under normal circumstances. But neither Jacobs nor Davoud considered this launch normal. They would have to generate hydrogen. Again, water could be charged to produce the hydrogen needed, but liquefying it would be a trick. The Toyotomi had compressors, but it would take days to create enough hydrogen to fill the tanks. Fueling was a dangerous job, and 5 days of it was something no reasonable pilot would want to undertake. Too many risks of an accident. A liquid hydrogen accident was usually the last one anyone would have. The two men explained these problems to Dakuda and the other refugees. Seeing the magnitude of the decision necessary, Takuda did not believe it should be his alone. It was fine for a commander to make tactical choices affecting the life and death of his unit, but this choice would affect the future of an entire civilization. It should be made by those most affected. The little society listened in silence as Davoud, Jacobs, and Goodall made their reports. Paul Tesseract was the first to respond. Ever since Fullerton's defection, he had become the spokesman for the humans from the enclaves. What do we have? What do we gain or lose if we leave? He asked. What do we gain or lose if we stay? What we gain if we stay, said Goodall, is the absolute certainty that we will be the gods of the Tatate for the rest of our lives. It was all right at first, but I'm not sure I want to have an entire society hanging on my every word, my every action for the rest of my days. I want the chance to be wrong for a change. I want to be able to make a mistake without having to wonder if it will kill someone. It's getting so I don't do anything without having some loving little fur ball at my feet or at my side. I'm tired of it. It isn't that I don't like them. Dakoto, Totito, Dokepi, and Teopo and the rest have all been good to me, to all of us. But I don't want to be the head of some society. As far as I'm concerned, I'd rather go somewhere else and leave them in peace. Let the memory of us be enough. We'll have fulfilled their legends. We'll have led them to a better place. The legend doesn't say anything about having to stay around. I say let's go. Be done with it. Goodall's opinion was echoed by many others. They were willing to try for the other planet, the one they now called Toku Kuni, the Tatate word for far country. There was nothing for them here, and if they were to start afresh, it would probably be better done somewhere else. Toku Kuni was the choice. The total human population of their group was close to 50 strong. They were enough to survive in a strange new world. If it was possible to make the dropship mechanically safe, if it was possible to fuel the drive for the liftoff, they were willing to make the trip. Tesseract had a request if they were to go. He wanted to make sure everyone knew the rules before they went aboard the dropship. Once on board, There would be no turning back. The request was seconded by all. This was a new experience for Takuda. Never before had he been involved in the creation of a government. The officers, Takuda, Davood, Goodall, and Jacobs, huddled together with Tesseract to cobble together a form of government, but the task was monumental. An absolute dictatorship with Takuda as the chief involved a whole series of problems, the most difficult of which was that of transition. Who would take over when Takuda's reign ended? And how would that time be determined? The desk commander wanted to be important in the government, but he did not want to be the government. The lights burned late in the dropship bridge as they hashed over the dilemma. It was a body of refugees and the rest of the desk team who finally solved the problem. They were willing, they said, for Takuda to have absolute power in the government for at least one standard year. After that, they suggested, the people should meet again. Yes, this would put absolute power into the hands of the military, but having seen Takuda in action in both combat and administration, they felt they could trust him. Besides, no one else in the group seemed qualified, so why not set up a government like a family with a paterfamilias? Their group was certainly small enough for that. According to the refugees, Takuda's greatest assets were his contemplative nature and his unwillingness to use his power in an arrogant or selfish manner. If he would lead, they would follow. Takuda took the news with resignation. He was proud that the members of the little society believed they could trust him, but sitting alone in his sparse quarters on the Hideyoshi Toyotomi, he wondered if he would be up to this new and immense responsibility. Now that the chain of command had been formalized, the weight of responsibility was even greater. There was also the problem of the Tatate. Takuda sought out the leaders of the combined tribes. He called together Totito, Dokepi, Dokoto, and Pikete of the Usugumo enclave to discuss the situation. The decision that the humans, especially Goodall, Jacobs, and Takuda, were about to depart threw the aliens into a panic. They had only just decided that the humans were the symbols of their new life, and now they would be deserting them. "No," said Takuda, "we are not deserting you. There was the legend that other humans would come to lead you to a better life, and that part of the legend has been fulfilled. There is nothing in the myth that says that the humans will remain to rule or guide. The ruling and the guiding must come from your own ranks. You have been through a great ordeal that has shown you your own ability to work together, no matter what your tribe of origin. No one will come here to trouble you for some time. The leaders of the enclaves will be at each other's throats. They will not come here looking for you, and even when they do, many more of your people will have joined you by then. They will hear of you, and they will come. Your force will be strong. From here on, you don't need us anymore."